how are you thinking about what a city is these days? Because for me, it's been changing.
I'm very sad that I can't like hug my mom, right? But I'm also really sad that I can't like have these kind of conversations with people maybe I sort of only vaguely know, but the people I definitely don't have their phone number or can't call them on Zoom or whatever.
I miss everybody. Like, I don't miss anybody specifically. I miss everybody, right? Everybody has always been around me and I miss everyone.
The way in which you understand yourself in the world does not happen at home. Like that happens outside.
Yeah, I definitely do a lot of research in my own practice as an artist through eavesdropping, through encounter, through observation. And those are things that have been completely absent for me, or almost completely absent for me for almost a year.
People are out on the street, people are doing things, but it's so much less and it's so different. And it's also so guarded in a way that seems so like, wow, it was so delightful before, when I know it wasn't actually delightful, but it feels like it was like so generous in this way.
One of the things that I've been trying to understand through family photographs, and particularly through relationships between people in family photographs and their facial expressions or their hand expressions, their gestural expressions, is sort of like, how do we map the affective knowledge that we can read from a family photograph, even if it isn't of our family, onto the kind of affective knowledge that we have or develop when we're living in a city together. Um, and I don't have the answer to that, but that's sort of the project that I'm loosely setting out to do through the seminar on public engagement. And I am still figuring that out, to be honest. I have not made huge strides, except that I still know it's true, right? So I'm looking for that picture that proves it.
For a long time, since the early 2000s, I've been working on this project of asking people to take me on guided tours of their neighborhoods. Um, and the biggest chunks of those were in Brooklyn and in Oakland in California. And I was thinking, one of the things that project is very much about is like how people make meaning and understand themselves and themselves in the world through their everyday places. And so in April, I was walking and I was thinking, I can't be in these places that I've spent, essentially my whole life thinking about and talking about like why they're important. These like, the supermarket or the diner or the bodega or whatever it is, that those are the things I've like dedicated most of my career to thinking about. And I'm not really able to be in them in the way that I usually am. And I was, thinking about like, okay, well, that actually helps me see like why that has mattered to me for so long. Um, and then also thinking like, well, though the lack of being able to be in those spaces and to kind of be making those connections is somehow another kind of lack and loss that we're all grappling with that's way harder to see.
People are like, what a loss for the business owner, what a loss for the neighborhood. But like, no, like, what a loss for you. What a
Mhm.
loss for me, not just because I can't wash my clothes at that laundromat or buy food from that corner store, but because those spaces are essential to our public and private understandings of who we are. We are shaped by those things. So, congratulations, like you just lost this huge body of knowledge about yourself. And I think that that's a part that often gets left out when we talk about this in a public discourse. I would argue, and this is going to be the unpopular part, that the more suburban mentality is that you do get the sense of yourself inside, within your home, within your family, within, as it is, your own backyard, right? So my argument is that for a lot of people, this loss has already been not only evident, but like totally acceptable to them in another format. And not only acceptable, but sort of preferable, seen as safer, seen as better for kids, seen as more convenient, right? Like given all of these other labels that we could have known a long time ago how that affects an understanding of a person within the context of society. And maybe we have known those things, but this is like another kind of turn on that makes that more explicit even to people within cities.
The two, like the businesses that are saddest to me that have closed or closest to me that have closed, as the diner in my neighborhood and the diner in my parents' neighborhood. That's like the only place that my dad would feel like comfortable in the neighborhood, hanging out, stuff. Like they knew all the people who worked there, and it's gone. And they're not going out of their house really right now. But when they do, I feel like they're going to be like, well, what's here for us?
My grandpa died during this past year, not of COVID, but like during COVID times. He was very, very old and he had a really wonderful life and he actually had a really beautiful death, all things considered. But we couldn't really tell a lot of his people that he died because they weren't people that we had their numbers or he had their numbers. But my dad actually walked down during the pandemic to tell my grandpa's diner guy, like, that he died.
Yeah,
Because it was essential,
totally.
right? Like, even during a pandemic, this was essential and needed to happen.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I, you know, I think a lot about like, well, when we sort of all, I don't know that we're going to emerge from this. I guess I keep imagining we've all been like, whoa, when things get back to normal. And I'm not sure that we're all going to just kind of emerge from this. But whatever is next, what are the ways in which we sort of sustain ourselves, support other people to kind of make those spaces and to value those spaces? And is that possible in New York?
It is my city. And I think that it has really passed a point of livability that is so obvious, but also just like so stupidly useless when you consider how much space is empty. What can be put into place policy wise that actually enforces some of the things that we've brought up during this conversation of like, okay, thinking just for yourself, thinking selfishly, you're losing so much by the city losing so much. How can we, as a policy, allow ourselves as individuals not to be able to lose so much? And not thinking about it for the protection of others, but for the maintenance of self. I think that's something I would love to see. I don't know how it would be as a law or as a series of measures, but I'd love to see that.
It's an interesting way of thinking about like, well, what would it look like to pitch those, not as here's this nice thing you should do for these other people, but here's this thing you should vote on and agree to and put your tax dollars towards because it's all about you, right? And that's really something that will enrich you. And I wonder that, like there's this part of me that's like, how do you convey that to people? But and also, would that sell, like work really good for you and me? And where we're like, yes, it would really improve my life. It is really enriching my life. But are there other New Yorkers who are like, no, I'm here for the Trader Joe's. I'm here for this, like, how do you convey to people almost either what they've lost or maybe even what they've never had? Maybe there's a way of saying like, this is a thing you don't even know that you could have, but you could if you actually lived in a city that wasn't quite so violent, right? That wasn't quite so violent toward what it is to have a life over time and to be able to be here and to be able to make long-term relationships, that are the long-term relationship with your diner guy, right?
Yeah, I was also thinking as you were speaking, just kind of tying together different things I heard you say, like the city is so violent, right? There's less crime, it's safer, but it's so much more violent to human life, broadly speaking, than it was when we were growing up. And so, even this idea of safety, whose safety and for how long and in what context is actually really specious.
It's both like, don't you want to be free? Like, I think we all really want to be free and we have to see it that way. We have to see this as like, okay, do it for yourself, right? Like think about what does it look like to do it for yourself? And I think there's this way in which we can see the city that way too. Like, how do you see like liberation for yourself? And that you, but it does require like a grasping and then an acknowledgement of the fact that we're all part of a society. And I think that is like the
Yeah, and a real
problem
honesty
with,
about like what you are as a self, not what you want to want or what you've been told to want, but like what actually do you want, which a lot of people are not able to acknowledge themselves in that deep of a way, I don't think.
the world around you impacts you, and acknowledging that happens, right? That the other people in your world and in the other people in the world impact you is such an important thing to actually recognize and say out loud, as opposed to feel like acting as though it was only ever you. which
For
is
sure.
awesome.